Welcome back, everyone. I'm teacher Nathan from Writers at Work, and this afternoon, let's take a look at the O Level 2020 paper. Today, our focus will be on the visual stimulus as well as the narrative text. So, without further ado, let's delve straight into the visual text. So, if we take a look here from the get-go, I'm only told that this is a web page, but there isn't any elaboration on what this page talks about. So let's take a look. If I look down further, then we see, okay, it's a hope farm. So it seems like they are trying to offer students some job or internship. Now, if we observe, why is there a colon here? For those of you who are unsure, a colon is used to describe or amplify the meaning of, in this case, the words on the left, which is hope fun. Therefore, it is not surprising when it talks about how they give students a brighter future, because that is the meaning of hope. That something that your future prospects, your something things that you do in the future or from that time forth is going to be positive. Now, if we look further down, we'll observe that the main idea is here. It's also bolded that they are trying to offer some kind of internship to students, right? So in your brain, you need to tell yourself this is your main idea already. And you can, and if you observe, they not only want to give people, especially students, jobs, they want to develop their skills that will be useful in a career where agriculture, horticulture. So we are looking at in the farming sector. Okay. Then if you see, they even have secondary ideas here, where they'll give you details regarding the main idea, which is your internship. So they are looking at how their short-term placements. So this is your secondary idea. They are trying to elaborate on when the internship can take place, right? And after that, apart from when, they will tell you where your internship can take place. So this is your secondary idea number 2. Hello, I love bingsu forever. So they tell you that you can work at the shop where you will be in charge of selling things to people. There is the farm. Then also there is the children's center where you'll be like a teacher. Hello, user 3619. I love bingsu. Right. Then if you read further down, they'll talk about what you need to do in order to get your internship. So over here you can hear this is the third idea. Right, and if you observe, apart from having the application form, you will also need a reference from your school, which is basically like your teachers recommending you for this internship, as well as a letter of consent from your parents. Then if you look further, after they introduce the whole internship and the 5W and 1H with regards to this job, we look at how the participant actually have had positive experiences, right? So you can see here, the idea is here where she was able to gain practical experience. So this means that there is an actual doing of something rather than theoretical knowledge. Okay, and with that, that would be our that's all the information that we need to make sense of for this uh, visual stimulus. Just leave the information here for everyone to take it in. If you have any questions, do feel free to ask me. Okay, if there are no further questions, then let's go and let's do the questions together. Okay, so the first question reads, looking at the heading Hope Farm and the phrase next to it, in what way does the Hope Farm offer students a brighter future? So you need to understand what does brighter future here means. It basically means something a future where you are successful and happy. So you need to bring out this meaning. Next is in what way. So over here we need to explain the phrase, which is brighter future, and then link it to the question. Okay. Now moving on, you can see observe question 2. They ask you to look at the photograph at the top of the web page and which cue does the photograph illustrate. So over here, the idea is very straightforward. You just need to list the skill. So you can see the mix of there's a stark contrast in the difficulty of question 1 versus question 2. Then you can see question 3 is a dead giveaway. What are two other things that the student need to prepare? It's a pure listing question. Then lastly, you can see they ask you to look at the participant feedback box and which phrase encourages students to apply. So you can see the reason why they ask for encouragement is basically you want to give the students the confidence that Hope Farm is a good place to intern at. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the students looking for when they do internship? And this will inform us on the kind of words that we will choose. Probably got to do with learning, some experience, hands-on, yada yada. Okay, so let's go straight to answering the questions together. Okay, so the first one, they ask you to look at the heading. I'm sure all of you saw it just now. I'm not going to scroll it back just to see. It's a Hope Farm. After that, then they say offering students a brighter future, right? So actually, for this case, they are trying to emphasize that the work experience provides an opportunity to develop skills that are useful in a career in agriculture or in this case horticulture, thereby giving students a head start in their career. To be successful. So you can see my sentence here, right? How did I derive the answer? So you can see there are a few parts. To develop the skills that are useful in a career. So we are looking at explaining. I'm just actually I'm for this part here. I'm just stating how the what does Hope Farm offer, and you can see the linking to the brighter future is here. It gives them a head start in their career to be successful. This is linking back to the question. Now, some of you will be asking, then where did I get this first part? They can develop the skills needed. Now it's over here. Develop the skills needed to be useful in your future career. This is where I get the context of a brighter future. So we need to ask ourselves, how do you get a brighter future? So the how is here. The method is here. I give you the skills, you'll be more experienced than your peers, you get that competitive advantage. So there's a higher chance that you can get or obtain jobs that are better in terms of their seniority, their pay, which would mean that you are successful. Okay, so these are the two elements for question 1. Now the next one is they ask you to look at the photograph and explain which skill the photograph illustrates. So the looking at the first photograph at the top of the web page. So you can see this photograph. Cambridge gives a black and white photograph which is not really clear, but you can see that there is some kind of animal here. And the intern over here is trying to give the animal food. Alright. So we can say that the skill needed or the skill that the intern would gain is taking care of the animals. Okay, it's very straightforward. Now they ask you that they tell you that students have to complete an application form, and they ask you what are the important elements or information they need to provide. It's also a very straightforward question. It's purely listing. So if we look at our text here, we already discussed it earlier. To inquire about your work placement, you need to complete application form, which they already mentioned. Then next, they say that you need a reference from the school or college. So you just need to copy it in its entirety. But of course, it needs to be relevant information. Next, you need to have a letter of consent from your parents or guardians. So you just copy this whole thing, and that will be all. But if you observe, this letter of consent will only be needed at where? Interview stage. So you need to specify the time period where this piece of information that I arrowed will be relevant. So the first thing you need to provide is a reference from their school or college. The next is a letter of consent from their parents or guardians at the interview stage. Okay, moving on. Question 4. They're trying to they want you to identify a phrase, that means more than one word, about this girl's comment that will encourage students to apply. Now, when you have all these quotation, the greatest fear actually is your access denied. So we need to be very laser focused on the phrase that the examiner is looking for, and is with regards to encouraging students to apply. So it got to do with what the students are looking for, and what we have earlier agreed upon is that kind of learning. So the phrase or that those few words need to be related to learning. Looking at our visual stimulus, I say it was really challenging to fit a placement around my studies. Now you can see practical experience here, which means that is there is some kind of application rather than just theory or textbook knowledge. So actually this thing that is rather than textbook knowledge already tells you the clue that this is what we are looking for. So it'll be very simple. You just need to talk about how what phrase. The phrase is practical, just two words. Practical application, practical experience. And there we have it, the whole visual stimulus completed. I just give everyone some time to take in the information I shared, especially with regards to how you answer the question. And if you have any questions with regards to this, please feel free to ask me. Okay? All right, if there are no further questions, let's take a look at our narrative text. Okay, so this text, as a rule of thumb, I always encourage you to read the synopsis first, because your synopsis here will give you a rough idea of what to expect in the text. So in this case, we are looking at how this girl goes to the library with her family. It's a rather straightforward and easy to understand idea. So when it's easy to understand, just be prepared for curveballs to be thrown, because many students will understand the text, so likely the questions will be more challenging this time around. But that being said, not to worry, let's just delve straight into the text now. So over here, I'm not going to read the whole text with you. I believe most of you have your 10-year series already. But I think the idea is I just want to bring out certain important points. Now you can see we are looking at how the day was really hot, and they talk about how it was the fiercest day yet. So it's a bit weird that they're comparing the weather to some kind of animal, because fiercest here has the meaning of something that is ferocious, like a lion, or you can say that it's very aggressive, or there's some kind of intensity in terms of that heat. Okay, Next, you see that the sky was iron flat, and even the clouds has fallen from the edges of the faultless blue sky. Right. So the first thing that we're interested in is what is the meaning of iron flat. So you need to understand, for those of you who do household chores, an iron is used to, what's the use of iron? It's used to straighten your clothes. Okay, that's why you have your iron line and you look very neat. Now, the reason why clothes can be straightened is because your iron is so hot, such that the steam and everything can cause the clothes to be very neat. So you are looking at how the sky was iron flat, which suggests that it was so hot the sky was straightened. Then some of you may be asking, so what is straightened? So you are looking at how all the clouds is just one smooth surface. Okay. And you can see the next thing we look at is how the peripheral clouds, which are like uh, those clouds at the lower altitude where they are like your cotton wool, those kind of thick clouds, they have fallen from the edges of the faultless blue sky. So actually, this one you can see is an exaggeration because clouds don't fall per se, but we are trying to uh, emphasize how there were no clouds in the sky because it was so hot. Okay, therefore the sun that did not have any shade. There were no clouds to reflect that kind of sun's ultraviolet rays. Okay, then paragraph 2 just talks about how uh, where the library was. It's just talking about the location. All right. Then paragraph 3 here, we see that Grace perceived the library to be her sanctuary. So you may be asking, what does this mean? This means a safe refuge. So it's a place where you feel comfortable, where you feel that it is safe from danger. And you can see how she described it as there were many unseen adventures. So these adventures here refer to something that is some kind of experience where it's unseen. So it's unseen here means unnoticed. So we are looking at unnoticed, exciting experiences. Next, you can see we are looking at Mrs. Morton giving the library, helping Grace with the returning of her books. And the first thing you observe is the librarian here snap shut the cover of the front book. So snap. So it's basically you are trying to use a metaphor here. Because when you use snap, it's basically the audible closing of a mouth. So it's like your shark. When it open and close the mouth, it's like kak, 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 that kind of sound. So over here, we are looking at how the librarian uh, could replicate that sound by closing the book. That means she must have slammed the book hard with some kind of force. Therefore, you can have that kind of closing and opening sound. It's like your alligator, that kind of the kind of sound where your teeth is like hitting against one another. All right. You can see why she was obvious dislike. You can see here that must be a first. And what's this first? That Grace Bennett's books are returned on time. So probably there's that assumption that Grace doesn't return her book punctually. Okay, then you can see uh, she also frowned at Grace. So all these clues tell you that Grace is disliked by the librarian. But as I've explained earlier, how I come to that conclusion, and the reason why you will need to observe these kind of things, your kind of speech, and the show not tell language that is present in your text. Okay. Now, if we move on, uh, you can see that Grace doesn't want to read in the children's section. So you can see Grace would like to go somewhere else, right? And there is a reason why, and over here you can derive a reason why Mrs. Morton thinks Grace is at the wrong place. Okay, grades are the best. Writers at Work is at Clementi there, right? Correct. We have one outlet, one tuition center at Clementi, and if you search our company online, it will show you the other locations where we are found out. Okay, we have 9 branches altogether. Clementi is just one of them. Okay, then you see in paragraph 6 here, we are looking at how Grace went to the other sections of the library. And you can see there's one very interesting phrase here. There's a ripe, solid smell. When we talk about ripe, we're looking at fruits. Your If you have gone to an orchard before, you can smell, like for example, your durians are of a certain smell. Then you know that you can actually harvest, you can farm them, you can eat them. So the thing about here, when we talk about library and how there's that kind of ripe smell, we are looking at how the books are very old and how they've been there for a very long time. But the smell here is very interesting of learning. So this means that they are very old because they have been able to pass down knowledge and information to people for a very, very long time. Okay, so let me just write it down. So the learning is about gaining the knowledge. All right, then moving on, you can see how uh, there are different experiences by Grace as she was in the new general knowledge section. The first is over here. We talk about how the conversation drifted at the top of the shelf. So this means how the conversation was slowly carried by the air. From one place to another to where Grace was standing. Then also, you can see how after she listened into that conversation, she lost the reception, which means that this reception is that process of receiving information. So we are looking at how in the beginning, Grace could hear what people were talking about. Then suddenly, maybe because people walked away, she could not hear already. And you can talk about how the voices floated away from the dictionaries and encyclopedia section. So it's like the voices faded away. So maybe people walk away and they talk, then probably it's further. Now you can see after she heard all these voices, she went to choose her books. That's why Mrs. Morton asked, are you done? Can we go? And you can see as they were walking out, we talked about how the heat made the edges of the world wave and swim. And this was in contrast to the start when we talked about how the library was very cold. Okay. So over here, uh, okay, I see where is it already. She took off her jumper, so it's like her sweater. Then now so when you wear a sweater, you're probably cold. But now you see, we talk about the heat, so there is a clear contrast between the two locations that we are exploring. Now you can see the last part Mrs. Morton pointed towards the gates like an intrepid sub-Saharan explorer. So this word here means someone who is fearless or adventurous. So after they walked out the library and experienced the heat, Mrs. Morton brought them to the park where it was a bit cooler in terms of temperature. All right, we are done. So let's move on to our questions. Okay, so you can see this question is very standard. Every O-level paper will have one of these vocab questions. So the main thing that you need to take note is this part here. How hot the weather was. So the vocabulary and the things that you quote need to be relevant. So you need to ask yourself the relevance of quotation, of quoted words. And now the next thing you need to know is your vocab for heat. So you need to explain why a certain vocabulary word is so significant with respect to the question which asks you about the heat. So let's take a look at some words that I pointed out earlier. So the first thing that we are looking at is this part where it says the fiercest day yet. The next thing that we observe is here. The sky was iron flat. And lastly, we also talk about how the clouds have fallen from these edges of the faultless blue sky. Now you can see, is the last phrase here, is everything important? Actually, no. We are just looking at how the clouds have fallen from the edges, that's all. Because we are looking at, we are trying to emphasize that there were no clouds in the sky to block the sunshine. Therefore, the heat was very intense. Okay, so with that in mind, let's start writing. So the first thing that we need to write is fiercest day. Holiday found its fiercest day. So this suggests the heat was at its most intense on this particular day. Next, the sky was iron flat. Suggests the heat was so strong like that of an iron heat that could straighten clothes. Thus, the heat flattened the sky. Likewise, even the clouds had fallen from the edges. So suggests the absence of cloud cover. The people were unshielded from the sun's intense heat. So you can see, after I quote, for example, the first one, we are looking at this thing most intense on that particular day, and we are looking at how hot the weather. So you need to have words like heat. So the sky was iron flat. The heat was so strong, like that of an iron seat that could straighten clothes. The heat flattened the sky. So you can see this is actually an outcome of the heat. So sometimes we may not be able to explain it adequately in terms of vocab. So we will show the outcome, because the outcome is got to do with the effect of something. And therefore, we can use that to exemplify the effect, which is what I'm using for the second quotation. And lastly, we observe that we are looking at how the clouds have fallen from the ages. So it's actually an exaggeration here. And this exaggeration is used to highlight the absence of cloud cover. And we need to give a further elaboration. So what if there's no cloud cover? It means that people were unshielded from the sun's intense heat. Therefore, it contributes to the question, which talks about how hot the weather was that day. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at our second question. Give one word in paragraph 2 which indicates the change from short to officers was gradual. So over here, when we use the word gradual, we're interested in that progressive or slow change. All right. So if we take a look at our text again, we're looking at how this is paragraph 2. They describe the location as inconveniently right at the end of High Street, right? And you can see the shops faded into offices for accountants and selectors. Then, so you can see how the location started off with those shops, your bakeries, your clothing store, and suddenly it shifted to offices. And from the offices, it moves slowly to become the library, and the library is at the end of the whole street. So the word that we're interested in would be faded. So we just give the answer as faded. Now, explain what the following phrases suggest about Grace's attitude to the library and the books in it. So this attitude here, what we're interested in is her way of thinking or feeling about something. So we observe the first word is about sanctuary. As I've shared earlier, we are looking at this safe refuge from danger. Danger here isn't well elaborated, but we could understand it as like the world and all the complexities. Okay. And part 2 asks you about unseen adventures and unturned pages. So your unturned pages here is, you can broadly think of it as the books not read. It's easier to understand because we are looking at pages that are not turned. That means you never read before. Next, when you look at unseen adventures here, unseen, that means something is not noticed. And your adventures that I've talked about earlier, we're looking at some kind of exciting or daring experiences. Okay, so when we talk about how this place is a sanctuary for something, how you will run to the library to find that kind of comfort, we would think of it as Grace has some a deep affection, or you could say a reverence for the library. Now, looking at our part 2, when you talk about unturned pages and unseen adventures, you can see that why Grace specifically brought out these adventures? You need to ask yourself, why did Grace bring out these adventures? Why would you talk about it? It's because you want to do it. That's why you have made mention about it, right? So we could think that she has that kind of keen anticipation or that kind of eagerness to read the books in the library. And you can see that the two words unturned and unseen are used together, which suggests that they are linked to one another. Now, how do we link it? I feel that when you talk about unturned pages, that means the books you haven't read. This means that in every book there's some kind of adventure, some kind of story. So because the books have not been read, uh, Grace will not be able to understand and appreciate the stories, which are also adventures. That kind of experience, experience of thrill, sadness, and different emotions that you can garner when you read a book. That's why they are used together as one phrase. And all in all, when you look at this, what is Grace trying to exemplify? She's trying to say that she's very eager to read all these books to try to experience all this that she has yet to experience before. Okay, moving on, let's take a look at question 8, where they ask you what's the tone of the librarian. So similarly, when you talk about tone here, we're looking at the quality of voice to show the speaker's feelings. And let's go on. There are also two other things. So when they ask you to list down two other things to show her dislike of Grace, we are looking at a show not tell technique. So there are certain actions which would suggest dislike, which means that she is hostile or she does not like Grace. Okay, so let's delve into paragraph 4 to answer our two questions. So in paragraph 4, we observe that okay, the first question is, she said that must be a first, that the books are returned on time. So you can see, why must you emphasize this fact that this is the first? So this will suggest that she is sarcastic. All right. So you're trying to emphasize a certain element that doesn't happen all the time, which is in this case returning the books punctually. And if you observe, the first thing that she did was she frowned at Grace, which means that uh, she probably don't like Grace. Okay. And the other thing that she did was she snapped the front of the cover. So there's some kind of force to show her displeasure, or like she doesn't like to entertain Grace when she's at the library. So the first one is the tone. The tone was sarcastic. Then moving on, we observe two other things. So firstly, now when you have two other things, you don't want the marker to be to be confused and mark you wrongly. So usually I will say firstly and secondly to signpost my answer. You can say firstly, the librarian snap shut the front cover of each book. That Grace returned. And the second thing that occurred was she frowned as she returned the tickets to Grace. Okay. This question part B isn't very difficult, but the only concern I have is you need to prevent access denied. Okay, and if you observe, it's only 1 mark, so it is either you get both points correct, or there's one access denied point and you actually just get 0 marks. So to prevent this access denied and from preventing the examiner from misinterpreting your first and second action, what I would suggest is to always have this keyword firstly, secondly. So it's very clear cut what people are doing, and they cannot fault you. Okay. Now moving on, let's take a look at question 9. So what does Mrs. Morton think Grace is why? Okay, the question asks you why. Okay, so we are looking at a certain reason for question 9A. And next, Grace says that she needs to broaden her reading. So when the question asks what does so and so mean, we are looking at paraphrasing. So we are trying to rephrase our answer to fit or to explain it further. And you need to broaden the reading. You are looking at how you want to widen your knowledge actually. This is the meaning. Okay. So let's take a look at paragraph 5. So in paragraph 5, Mrs. Morton told Grace, why are you going to the you're standing in front of the historical novels and you say, aren't you staying in the children's room? I've outgrown it, Mrs. Morton. I'm 10 now. Right? So over here, the reason why Mrs. Morton actually told Grace that idea like she's in the wrong place is because she was standing in front of the historical novels. Right? But actually that's not enough. To be exact, the idea is over here. Aren't you staying in the children's room? So when Mrs. Morton asks this question, you need to ask yourself, for every question there is that assumption. So the assumption here is probably Grace is leaving the room. That's why Mrs. Morton would specifically ask her, why are you leaving the room? Or why aren't you staying in the room? Okay? So there is that kind of inference that we need. Then you can see that Mrs. Morton said that there are appropriate books for 10-year-old girls, and she needs to broaden her reading because she has read them all. So you can see when you finish reading everything, and there's a need to broaden your reading, is the idea that you want to increase the range of books or the genres of books read. That's why she is moving away from the children's section to the adult sections, as we have read in the later part of the text. So in this case, let's go back to our question first. So she asks, why do you think she's in the wrong part? Because Grace was leaving the children's room. Where Mrs. Morton thought the books were more suitable for there. The question is on when is the next primary live? The next primary live is 2:30 p.m. today. Okay, and the next one after today's 2:30 p.m. session is tomorrow 10:30 a.m. Okay, so this arrangement would continue from today to every Wednesday to Friday of the whole of December. Now let's move back to the question. Now you're saying Grace says she needs to broaden her reading. So we already know that she already finished reading all the children book, and therefore she wants to gain that kind of knowledge. So we will say that so when she said I need to broaden my reading, she meant that she wanted to widen the genre, or you could even use a better word, repertoire, as we have learned in the primary school lesson earlier, of books she reads. Okay. Now let's take a look at question 10. And you can see what you're trying to ask, what did Grace experience there for the first time? So we need to infer from the text. And let's go to paragraph 6 first. So in paragraph 6, we observe that it was unfamiliar. So this word unfamiliar already tells you it's probably the first time. That's why she's not comfortable with that smell. It's something that she hasn't experienced before. And what is it over here? They say the right smell of learning. So you need to ask yourself, what does this right smell means? And what is it? Solid smell of learning. As we have discussed earlier, we're looking at okay, thanks, Cher. So it's every Friday, Wednesday to Friday, 2 sessions. Correct. Twinkle star, correct. Wednesday to Friday, 2 sessions a day. And this is for December, okay? Right, solid smell of learning. So for this case here, we are looking at that kind of newfound knowledge gained. So what did Grace experience? She experienced the feeling of gaining newfound knowledge. Okay, it's understood because the question already tell you it's non-fiction session. Okay, I'm great. I'm happy that you guys find my lessons interesting and useful. So if you would like to share this joy of learning with other people, do share with them the link and encourage them to join me as well. Okay. Okay, so this question 10 is quite straightforward, and I think we already discussed it earlier when we read the text. So let's move on to paragraph 7 now. So you're trying to identify words or phrases. So you see, this is a very scary thing because you don't know whether it's words or phrases. So if you have the impression that it's a phrase, but actually we are just looking at certain words, then you got it wrong already. And the opposite way as well, right? But how do we prevent ourselves from making such mistakes? Well, it's simple. You look at all these given parts. You hear people talking. There was a gap in what she could hear. She could no longer hear. So all these keywords would give you uh, a certain inclination towards what to find. So when we hear about people talking, there needs to be some kind of vocab about people talking. Maybe there was murmuring. You could hear people whispering. There needs to be something related to talking. So the easiest way is to think about synonyms. And when you go into the text, identify these kind of synonyms. Okay, you guys who are doing all these are secondary school students. I believe your vocabulary bank is much better than my primary school friends. All right. So if you look at our text here, we are in paragraph 7 right now, and we are looking at how you can see they wanted people who are talking, right? So what's another word for talking? Your conversations, right? So immediately I really zoom in conversation, and when you hear about people talking, where's this conversation? Let's take a look. Drifted across the top of the shelf. Well, then this is already you can see the voices move somewhere along the aisles. So you can see the voices here doesn't mean is talking. it can be just some sound. And you can see that the voices move somewhere else along the aisles and they lost reception. So you can see the second part is there was a gap in what Grace could hear. So the gap, when you talk about a gap, it needs to be like that kind of interval. But this phrase here, they move along the aisles, doesn't imply there's a certain interval. It just means that the voice was moving from place A to place B. So we will not consider this. Next, you can see reception. When you lost the reception, that means you suddenly cannot hear something. So initially you can hear, then suddenly cannot hear. Why? No one knows. And we are not interested to know because that's not the question. So you can see this reception that is lost here is that interval or that time period where you cannot hear anything. And this is basically what we're also interested in when we talk about there's a gap in what Grace could hear. All right. And lastly, we talk about how she could no longer hear anything. Means the voice moved away somewhere. So we'll use this phrase, they floated away. Floated away, faded away. That means very loud. You can hear people talking, then suddenly softer, softer, softer. You cannot hear already. That's what we are looking at, the idea when she could no longer hear anything. Okay, so you can see we already have our answers all prepared in the text for us. So let's just write it down now. So when you can hear people talking, we are looking at the conversation drifted across. The shelves. Then the next one, there was a gap. So when you talk about gap, is this time period that is short. So we need to use the word for a moment. This is the first three words of the sentence. Yeah, I lost reception. Okay, so this is the short time period that we are looking at. Then now the last one is we cannot hear anything, so the voices floated away. Now moving on, question 8. There's a contrast between the atmosphere inside the library and outside the street. So as all of us know, inside the library is very cold. Outside the street, it was very hot. How do I derive this? Later we go to the text and see. Then you can see the next one is how Mrs. Morton is a fearless person, and which phrase. So it's more than 2 words or more. And we are looking at how she was a fearless person, which means she was brave. Okay, let's go to the text and identify all these things now. How the first one we're looking at the contrast between the library. So as we have discussed earlier, she took off her jumper. That means she was so cold she has to wear outer clothing, right? Her jacket. Then the contrast is here. The heat which made the edges of the world wave and swim. So this already tells you that there's a contrast in the weather. Next, we are looking at how Mrs. Morton was fearless, right? And actually, the fearless word actually is here. Yeah, we already identified earlier, intrepid. But we want to talk about how she's a fearless person. So we are just not looking at the adjective to describe Mrs. Morton, but rather we are looking at this whole idea that she was she was fearless. And how did she behave? She is likened to become an explorer, right? As stated here, a sub-Saharan explorer. So it's like someone who is discovering new lands in the desert. So we need to put this phrase inside the whole question in its entirety, because we are looking at explorer as well. So our 2 answers will be as follows. So the first one, the contrast between inside and outside the library. What is the contrast? So they ask what is the contrast. So actually my answer is here, cold and hot. So the library is very cold. Now, when you have this kind of word contrast, your answer needs to have the conjunction that shows contrast. So you can say, but. I'm trying to use this. Okay, never mind. I just write it in small letters. It seems grammatically wrong. Or you can say however, or you can put full stop. or however, while outside is very hot. Okay, so actually this inference question is a low-hanging fruit. Anybody, whether your English is excellent or just pass, you are able to derive this. It's not difficult. You're just looking at a text. You're just inferring the show not tell. When someone takes off the jumper, you need to ask yourself, what is that? Why is she doing it? And because of that, because you slow down and you pick up the nuances of this language, you are able to answer this question already, and it's a free 1 mark, right? By just deriving this simple inference. Next, we talk about how she's a fearless person. We have explored the idea, in intrepid sub-Saharan explorer, and there we have it. This is another low-hanging fruit, because the part 12b in the last paragraph, you can see that there are only a few sentences there, and what are the odds of getting it wrong? I think it's much lower than finding the correct answer. Okay, so I also will not dwell too much on this. Now let's take a look at the global question. So actually this global question here is just testing you on your ability to identify the main thing inside the text. So as a marker or as an examiner, I will have that one special line or that sentence that summarizes the whole text. Okay. And in my answer key, it will be related to this. All right, so let's take a look. Paragraph 1 to 3. So paragraph 1 to 3, where is it? Here. We are looking at how they are going down to the library, and we can see the main thing that we are interested in is actually here. After my bedroom, this was my sanctuary. So this already tells me that there's some kind of comfort, and not only that kind of comfort when you go to a place, is that kind of familiarity. I know where I'm going. I'm following the same old route. That's why you can see the other supporting details. We talk about how she could tell it was all the shops first selling your bakery, your clothing store, then the officers for the accountant and the lawyers, architects, then the library. So the main takeaway or the main sentence here, after the bedroom, this was my sanctuary. And why is it sanctuary? Because there's that kind of comfort and familiarity in the library. And not forgetting, there's also that sense of familiarity when she goes to the library, where she is able to uh, describe the journey from the shops, how they fade, what will happen. You see? So all these, the main sentence together with my supporting information here, tells me that it is a familiar journey. So that will be my answer. It's not really difficult. Now, looking at paragraph 4 and 5, we are looking at how the librarian didn't really like her, right? And if we observe, there were two things that happened. The first one is here. Despite her obvious dislike of me, I gave her my biggest smile and she handed over my tickets and frowned. So this sentence really tells you how she's trying to deal with someone who hates her, and in this case, an adult librarian. And at the same time, you can see over here, yes, I read that, I need to broaden my reading. You are trying to convince Mrs. Morton that she wants to go to somewhere that is that she hasn't gone to before, which is the adult section of the library. So all these point to a certain kind of activity that she's doing, right? It's not, if we just look at paragraph 5 separately, it could be looking at how she's actually curious, right? It actually can be number curing curiosity for this. But because there's paragraph 4 inside, and paragraph 4, there isn't curiosity, but rather how she is able to deal with that unhappy librarian, the answer will be here, managing adults. And lastly, look at paragraph 6 and 7. Paragraph 6 and 7 here, we are looking at how she was trying to trying to find something new, right? Her new books. That's why you can see here, it was unfamiliar, the right solid smell of learning. So we are looking at how uh, she's trying to gain something from her experience in the adult section. Okay, and you can see this word unfamiliar already tells me that you are trying. There's that element of exploration. As such, my answer here would be showing curiosity instead. Okay, now for our friends who may not be able to derive some of the answers halfway, you can just go on first and just eliminate. Okay, but I'm just showing you from that marker's point of view how I derive the answers, or how I even set a certain global question and some of these statements that you will use. Okay, now let's take a look at paragraph 8, last one. So over here we are looking at how uh, she was how you can see the last part when they go out of the library. That's the like the ending scene. It's not the main point. The main point, as you can see from the start, have you chosen? Mrs. Walter asked. I have. And now you can see this is the main part. I have, although my chin was steady towel books at arm, it wasn't easy to speak. So actually, uh, what we are looking at is how the day at the library ended. And how did he end? He ended with who is this? Grace having the ability to find new books, adult books that she could read at home. So this tells me that it is more of a something that she was happy, because in the previous segment we talked about how she was very curious, and how now her curiosity was uh, fulfilled, which is here a satisfying outcome. All right, and with that, we have come to the end of our O level paper today. Okay, so I'll just give everyone some time to take in the information. And if you have any questions regarding our this paper, O level English, or even our writing at work lessons, right? Do feel free to ask them in the comment section. All right. If there are no further questions, I thank you so much for joining me this afternoon on our Writers at Work TikTok, where we were able to learn about our O-level English stuff. Okay, so if you have friends who are taking primary 5 or primary 6 examinations, do join me tomorrow morning. Actually, today afternoon we already have a session at 2:30 p.m. You can join me and we'll look at some papers. Nanyang and I think Catholic High, Taonan, Nanyang, and there's another paper. I'm going through two of the written assessment one. Okay, so if you have time this afternoon, do join me. If not, you can always catch me live again on Thursday and Friday at 10:30 a.m. for our primary school lessons, and as usual, the 12:15 for our secondary school lessons. Okay, I'll see everybody on TikTok. Bye bye.